I'm Wes Fisher, co-chair of the International Association for Impact Assessment's Climate Change section. I'm going to be talking to you about 2050 climate change and other global impacts and addressing long-term cumulative effects. I'm a biologist and geologist by training. It's an honor for me to address you at the 19th Annual Conference of the Iranian Association for Impact Assessment. I'm going to be touching on the following topics: our global predicament, addressing climate change, as well as other global impacts affecting Earth and human systems in a time of urgency, and a bit about the nature of overshoot of planetary carrying capacity, including impacts on climate, the rationale behind the selected actions of IAEA's Climate Change Action Plan, progress on its implementation to date, and progress on assessing global cumulative impacts to 2050 and beyond, and the potential alternatives for addressing these impacts at the global and local level, and how to select among mitigation alternatives for 2050 strong sustainability. And I have emphasized strong here because sustainability can mean different things to different people depending on their points of view. But strong sustainability is linked to the biosphere, conditions of the biosphere. Some reasons for optimism: emergent conditions that are driving rapid social and economic change. They may not look rapid, but in fact, there is a significant shift taking place. And then some summary thoughts. A number of you may have seen this graphic developed by the Stockholm Resiliency Center. It depicts planetary boundary conditions, and the one of greatest concern to us at the moment is climate change and ocean acidification, mainly due to carbon emissions. Biodiversity loss, though, and ecosystem degradation is critical concern as well, as you can see in the graphic, as is perturbed biogeochemical cycling, primarily the release of nitrogen and phosphorus to our oceans and freshwater bodies, most of it through agricultural production around the world. Land use and land cover change, freshwater abstraction, systemic chemical pollution, altered atmospheric physics and chemistry, and there are a number of others. These are interacting pressures and they are building up fast. And this is another depiction. I'm not going to go into detail other than to read from top to bottom the other impacts on the biosphere, Earth's surface, the oceans, kelp forests, seagrass meadows, large predatory fishes, live coral cover, terrestrial vegetation, wetland areas, free-flowing rivers, terrestrial biodiversity, vertebrate population size, wild mammals, endangered plants, and threatened species. And I also wanted to bring to your attention this paper from back in 2021 in the Frontiers in Conservation Science, written by, I think, 13 conservation scientists, understanding the challenges of avoiding a gas leak future. So it just reemphasizes that we have no time to lose here. From an IAEA practitioner's point of view, like myself, this is a particularly telling graphic. It shows wildlife population decline on the left since 1970, and on the right, since 1974, the exponential growth in the number of EIAs and SEAs being published. And I think something is not quite right with this. I think that there's a similar graphic for plant species decline. And I wanted to touch on urban megagrowth, the trends. There are 4 billion people living in cities now, and as you may have read or heard, we just topped the 8 billion mark for the number of us on the planet. The urban population is 9 times larger than it was 100 years ago, and it's expected to more than double to greater than 9 billion of us, with nearly 7 out of 10 in the world living in cities by 2050. And why is this important? Well, because urban areas consume 2/3 of the world's energy and create over 90% of global CO2 emissions. This is another depiction of urban growth from 30% in 1950 to projected 68% in 2050. This raises the question, is 21st century urbanization out of control? This is actually a photo of Mexico City in 2019. There are 1 billion of us living in slums and informal settlements, and these are mainly young people. More than 500 million are youth, 13 times more than the entire population of Canada, 5.7 times that of Iran, and 3.4 times more than all of Russia. And you could see, you can sort of contemplate the implications of trying to meet the sustainability development goals for climate change and other changes to the biosphere by 2030. And this graphic is a little formula that shows the linkage between environmental impacts and social impacts. Number of people, P, A being affluence, the more affluence, the greater the impact, and T, technology. Technology can actually lower impacts, but if the technology is not properly assessed, can be a further contributor to both environmental and social impacts. Do we fully grasp how serious this is? I think many of us do. If so, what do we do next? Well, I think now in play are very positive public and private sector interests, which, in spite of strong resistance, are creating transformational change. Youth, students, and their assessments of the future will become a major factor in restoring biosphere stability. So I think what's happening is the pressure from the scientific community, from youth, from other professional bodies and earth scientists is now that knowledge is reaching those with who have the wealth and power, and they have children and grandchildren as well. So there's a shift in thinking that's occurring, and that thinking is rapidly taking hold. While many existing centers of political, economic, and personal power remain locked in patterns of unsustainable growth, the arguments in favor of maintaining a sustainable commons and biosphere are reaching a wider and wider audience, with major shifts in the financial and corporate world now taking place. Through the continuing emergence of new information systems for global and local problem solving, and the exponential evolutionary changes in digital communication and artificial intelligence, rapid societal change is showing itself in enlightened political and economic and financial leaders, the insurance industry, the academic and corporate world, science journalists, and educated populations. So for the climate change section of IAEA, what does this mean? We see the urgent need for action, but after years of effort, we continue to encounter policymakers and the public with only limited understanding of how to proceed in a way that incorporates the do no harm principle, same principle practiced by doctors and actually by engineers, and ethical principles of impact assessment into the need for a major, rapid, and efficient transition to a sustainable global economy. So within the climate change section, we have focused down on efforts to reach beyond our own profession and build collaborative relationships with the following groups: environmental law organizations, financial institutions, the insurance, reinsurance industry, and risk assessment specialists, and with urban planners and decision makers and environmental journalists. And we have actually created technical advisory groups for the first three, for liaisoning with environmental law organizations, with financial institutions and urban and regional planners and decision makers. And if you want to know more about what the tech groups are doing, visit the IAEA website. You'll find a status report on what has happened over the last year. As IAEA practitioners, it's past time for us to join forces with other organizations to ensure greater attention to long-term cumulative impacts and mitigation strategies for addressing climate change and other global impacts, environmental and social development strategies, and of course, environmental justice. And to achieve strong sustainability, we need to link it to conditions of the biosphere. And IUCN has developed global standards for nature-based solutions, which are now a very important tool to be used by the financial industry and corporations in particular, but by earth scientists in general, to look at how to achieve strong sustainability. This is another one, the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, directly linking strategic SIAs and SCAs, and it's the world's most authoritative biodiversity data for your world-shaping decisions. And another, if you read the caption under companies taking action, more than 1,000 businesses are working with the Science Based Targets Initiative to reduce their emissions in line with climate scientists. And we're all concerned about greenwashing, but if the companies follow these science-based targets, will be a very important step forward. There are entities that are tracking how well companies are now doing in following these targets. And this group was formed at COP26, April 2021, by former Bank of England chief Mark Carney, and Bloomberg and company are also involved in this, promising to follow scientific guidelines for cutting carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. With over 450 financial firms involved across 45 countries, handling assets over $130 trillion. So what does this mean for strategic environmental and social impact assessment specialists? Well, one way of looking at this is that IA practitioners are guides who try to get their maps read before journeys begin in order to find the best paths and do no harm. So we want to get planners and ESIA practitioners together early on when concepts are first taking shape, not after designs have become done deals, many of you know. To reverse the drastic deterioration in planetary climate conditions and address very dangerous overshoot from other global impacts, we've got to take our skills beyond our professional planning and IA affiliations as I'm sure many of you are already doing. Talking to ourselves is important, but doesn't address why our concerns receive little attention beyond our own circle of professionals and supporters. This time of emergency, we'll have to do more. We'll find a group that is action-oriented and jump in. Are they a dynamic planning institution, an effective environmental law group, or a network of financial institutions? Are they reinsurance specialists or risk analysts or city planning bodies, students, journalists? Any of these groups can benefit from your planning and strategic environmental social impact assessment knowledge and discipline. So push for opportunities to engage a wider audience in understanding the value and elements of strategic environmental and social assessment and long-term cumulative effects analysis. And I wanted to talk a little bit about emergence, something that is more than the sum of the parts. It's like the going from the one-celled animal up the chain to much more complex life forms, including our species. The emergence of chlorophyll, what plants mean to us and to our existence. The emergence of language, the printing press, maybe even the cell phone. Don't discount what emergent phenomenon can bring to our future. Now, what might we do? Well, we could form a new global financial and developmental institution similar to the World Bank system to address the full range of environmental and social mega-growth issues, incorporating strong sustainability standards linked to planetary boundary conditions and maybe family planning and incentives as well. A new Bretton Woods with environmental, social, economic diversity. Innovative financing, social impact bonds, green bonds that don't increase national indebtedness, and a global biosphere database that gives us the baseline and solid data for planning purposes. I wanted you to look at this group, the Center for Global Development. They've been looking at reforms to the World Bank and multilateral development systems to meet shared global challenges. And this think tank has been around for some time. These are people who really know the financial world and the international financial development world. And collaborating with them would give them the insight into what's happening to the biosphere. I think they're also hearing it from earth scientists, from the scientific community, as well as being pressured. I think youth see these things as well, and the influence of youth, both their own children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, is going to be quite a shift in global thinking. It's just, we're right on the cusp. Lastly, I wanted to touch again on the need to look at what it would take to make sure that all women globally have access to family planning incentives and services, and that it would not take a great deal of funding to make sure that that access is provided. Finishing with a statement from Nelson: education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So with that, much appreciation, and enjoy the rest of the conference. There are my coordinates.